We often think of the word Amen as a spiritual punctuation mark, the verbal equivalent of a period at the end of a sentence, or the send button on an email. We say it to signal that we are finished talking to God, or to signify that a service has concluded. But in its original context, this ancient word was never meant to be a passive ending. It was intended to be a courageous beginning. In the ancient world, words weren't just labels for objects. They were portraits of reality. When we peel back the layers of our modern usage and look at the literary design of the biblical narrative, we discover that Amen is one of the most powerful, legally binding, and transformative words in the human vocabulary. To say Amen is not merely to agree. It is to plant your feet on solid ground and declare that you are staking your life on the faithfulness of another. To understand the nuance of this word, we have to look at its linguistic DNA. Amen comes from the Hebrew root emn, aleph mem nun. In the Hebrew language, roots are interconnected, forming a web of meaning that provides a rich portrait of a concept. This same root gives us the word emunah, which we often translate as faith, and emet, which we translate as truth. But in the ancient mind, truth and faith weren't just abstract ideas or intellectual assent to a list of doctrines. They were physical metaphors. The root emn describes something that is firm, reliable, or trustworthy. It's the imagery of a solid pillar holding up a massive structure, or a nurse holding a child in her arms, providing a foundation of safety and support. When an ancient Israelite said Amen, they were saying, "This is reliable," or "I am leaning my full weight on this." In the original context of the biblical narrative, Amen functioned as a legal and communal oath. We see this clearly in the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy, where the community would gather to hear the terms of the covenant, the sacred partnership between God and humanity. As the terms were read aloud, the people would respond with a collective Amen. This wasn't a polite nod of the head. It was a binding commitment to a shared reality. They were stepping into a covenantal relationship where their flourishing was directly tied to their faithfulness to the partner who had first been faithful to them. This brings us to a crucial nuance in the literary design of the Bible. Throughout the Old Testament, Amen is almost always a response. God speaks and humanity responds with Amen. God promises and the people say, "So be it." It is the human echo of a divine decree. It represents the moment where the human heart aligns itself with the will of the Creator, creating a bridge between the heavens and the earth. However, when we move into the New Testament, we see a fascinating shift that completely upends our understanding of this word. In the Gospels, Jesus uses the word Amen in a way that was entirely unique in the ancient world. Instead of ending his statements with Amen as a response to God, he frequently began his teachings with it. In many translations, this is rendered as verily, verily, or truly, truly. In the original Greek text, it is Amen, Amen. By placing the Amen at the beginning of his speech, Jesus was making a radical claim. He wasn't just agreeing with a truth, he was claiming to be the source of it. He was identifying himself as the Amen, the firm foundation upon which all of reality rests. This is why the book of Revelation gives him the title, the Amen, the faithful and true witness. In the person of Jesus, the biblical narrative shows us a perfect union. He is the God who makes the promise, and he is the human who says Amen to that promise on our behalf. He fulfills the partnership that humanity had fractured. Through him, the Amen becomes a vehicle for restoration, a way for us to re-enter the wholeness we were designed for. When we view Amen through this lens of covenant and partnership, it transforms how we perceive our place in the world. The biblical story portrays humanity not as passive observers of the divine, but as active participants in the ongoing work of creation. We are called to be Amen sayers. Think about the symbolism of a building. A building can have beautiful walls and ornate decorations, but if the pillars are not firm, the structure cannot stand. Our lives are often built on shifting sands, our emotions, our circumstances, or the opinions of others. When we integrate the ancient meaning of Amen into our prayer life, we are essentially saying, I am moving my weight off of these unstable foundations and placing it onto the faithfulness of God. This is where the concept of flourishing comes into play. In the biblical narrative, flourishing, or shalom, is not just the absence of trouble. It is the presence of wholeness and right relationship. For the ancient world, this wholeness was only possible when a person lived in alignment with the truth, emet. By saying Amen, we are intentionally aligning our internal world with the external reality of God's kingdom. We are saying that we believe God's vision for the world, a vision of justice, mercy, and restoration, is more real and more solid than the brokenness we see around us. So, how does this ancient context transform our modern prayer life? First, it changes Amen from a conclusion to a commitment. When you finish a prayer and say Amen, you aren't just saying, I'm done talking. You are saying, I am ready to act in accordance with what I have just prayed. If you pray for peace and say Amen, you are committing to be a person of peace. If you pray for the needs of the poor and say Amen, you are affirming your role in God's partnership to bring flourishing to the vulnerable. It is a word of participation. Second, it brings a sense of stability to our spiritual lives. In our modern culture, we are often plagued by nuance-free certainties, or, conversely, a lack of any firm ground to stand on. Amen offers a third way. It is a calm, resolute confidence. It acknowledges that while we may not have all the answers, we know the one who is the foundation. It allows us to hold our anxieties in one hand and God's faithfulness in the other, and choose to lean our weight toward faithfulness. Finally, the word Amen reminds us that we are part of something much larger than ourselves. When we say Amen, we are joining a chorus that spans thousands of years. We are echoing the patriarchs, the prophets, the apostles, and the interconnected community of faith throughout history. We are affirming that the story of restoration that began in the ancient world is still unfolding today, and we are choosing to play our part in that literary design. To say Amen is to acknowledge that we were made for partnership. We were made to look at the beauty, the complexity, and the promises of our Creator and say, yes, this is firm, this is true, this is where I stand. As we move forward, let us stop treating this word as a mere formality. Let us treat it with the reverence it deserves. Let it be the moment where we stop speaking and start standing. When we say Amen, let us feel the weight of the pillars beneath our feet. Let us remember that we are calling forth the wholeness of the ancient world into the chaos of our modern lives. The Amen is our signature on the covenant. It is our yes to the restoration of all things. It is the sound of a human heart finally finding its firm foundation. It is not just the end of a prayer. It is the beginning of a life lived in the light of what is truly real.